For those of you just joining us, welcome. Robyn Roscoe will share her expertise with us on managing in all directions. So Robyn, over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura, and good morning or good afternoon to all of you. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm going to be talking about managing in all directions, and really what I'm talking about is managing up, across, and down. And we all have work relationships in all of those directions, and we can apply some different techniques in order to make sure that that work and our relationships in those areas are efficient and effective. Our key messages for today, I'm going to be talking about communication, delegation, and persuasion as techniques that we can use in those relationships. And we'll talk about building effective relationships and the role that respect plays in all of those things. So first off, I want to talk about managing. We're talking about managing in all directions, but to make sure we all are thinking and talking about the same thing, perhaps you can use the chat box to comment on how you would define what we mean by managing or management. And I'll just pause for a second, take a sip of water, and you can put some thoughts in the chat box. Yep, leading and keeping things on track, providing support for our teams to achieve our goals. That's a good one. Anybody else? Yeah, making sure that things are getting done properly. That's another one that that makes sense as well. So to me, when I think about managing, first of all, talking about management, the noun of it, it's about organizing and coordinating activities, getting people to work together, as someone said, leading the people and supporting the team, and controlling things or people in order to get things done and accomplish the objectives of our work. Managing, so the action of doing the work in that area, refers to planning, organizing, influencing, and controlling. So all of the things that we might do in order to achieve that good organization and coordination. So what some of the things that we manage, we have to manage the communications and connecting people together, managing the information, so getting the right information in front of people, but also being able to know where all of that information and documentation is, getting things from one place to another, so the logistics of the work that we might do. Of course, the finances, how we're going to pay for all of the work that we're doing and the people that are doing it, and when is this work going to happen, so the scheduling of it. All of these things are a part of the work that we do to manage our activities, manage our teams, and manage our work. In the managing in all directions context, we have to think about managing up, across, and down. And I'm going to talk about all three of these directions. First of all, looking at managing up. We often think we can't manage the people that are above us, but there are some things that we can do and actions that we can take in order to make sure that we're building and maintaining that relationship well and being able to manage the work that we're doing and the information that we're getting from that up direction. So some of the things that we can focus on in order to manage up better, first is knowing what matters. So getting to know the people that we are reporting to that are above us in the organization of our work or our projects, understanding how they like to work and what are the things that are important to them. Is it most important to them that all work is done on time? Or is it most important to them that we're creative in our problem solving? So related to this is getting to know who we're dealing with, getting to know those people, understanding how they like to work as well. How do they like to receive information and questions? For example, do they like us to hold our questions for our weekly meeting, or do they like us to ask our questions by email on an ongoing basis? Another thing we have to think about when managing in this up direction is to accept the decisions that are made. So when the people above us in an organization or a project make things need to happen, we need to accept those and follow the work according to those decisions. But we also need to think about recognizing and respecting that decisions may change for reasons that are beyond our control or beyond even our information or understanding. And we need to be prepared to have the flexibility for those changes that might happen and redirect our work and efforts accordingly. Establishing semi-permeable boundaries means being able to say no to certain tasks or assignments, but recognizing when we might need to be flexible in that as well. So understanding what work is our responsibility and what things we are going to take on, but also recognizing when and where we may need to take on some additional things in order for our work and the work of our projects and teams to be successful. And a key tool that we need to use when it comes to managing the up direction is communication. Communication is an essential management tool or skill, and it works primarily in the up direction, but it also applies to the across and down directions as well. Communication things to remember, a bit of communication 101. Communication is always a two-way street. There's always a sender and a receiver in communication. And if we're sending information, we have a responsibility to make sure that what we're providing as our message is clear and concise and complete. I call that the 3C principle of communication. We want to make sure that our message is clear, so it's unambiguous what it is that we're saying or what our question is that we're asking. We want to make it concise so that we're respecting the time of the people that we're interacting with, and that it's supporting the clarity of our message and what it is that we're trying to say or ask. But we also need to make sure that our messages are complete, that the person who is receiving them will have all the information that they need in order to understand what our message is or what our question is. And it's a bit of a challenge sometimes to make our messages both concise and complete. But if we work at minimizing the words that we use or the references that we include in our information, and making sure that we're focusing on our message and what's required to understand it, we can achieve that clarity that we want in the messages that we're delivering. In terms of communication being two-way, we have a sender and a receiver, a person who's sending the message and the person who's getting it. In order to complete communication, our message needs to be both received by the person and understood by them. And they have to let us know that they've received our message and that they understand it. We, of course, need to use the appropriate tools, and this is related to getting to know the people that we're working with or working for and how they like to receive information. Whether it's email or voicemail or in-person meeting, make sure that we're using the right tools for the message, but also the right tools for the person that we're communicating with. And knowing who that is, knowing our audience, who is it that's going to receive this message and what do they need to hear in order to get the information and answer our question. A big part of this is controlling the number of channels that we're using with communication. I'm sure you've all experienced receiving a message that's copied to a bunch of different people, and that can result in just a slew of reply alls and a bunch of different conversations going on around the same message. Controlling the numbers of channels means thinking very carefully about who you're going to include in a message so that only the people that need to know it understand it and reply as necessary. One of the things you can do to manage this if you're using email as your primary tool is to, in the to box of your message, include the people that need to read and understand and perhaps reply to the message that you're delivering. If you want to inform other people about the conversation, you can include them in the CC box, and that should indicate to them that they're being copied for their information, but they're not one of the direct recipients of the message. Of course, gossip is a thing that we don't want to encourage or rely on in our workplaces, and we shouldn't rely on it for delivering messages either. So it's important that we don't use it in a way that reinforces gossip as an official way of getting information, and we shouldn't rely on it for receiving information either. And lastly, when we are receiving communications, if we're the receiver, it's our responsibility to acknowledge that we've received the message and provide some indication that we understand it and perhaps provide the answer that someone is looking for. It is better to reply to someone and say, I don't know the answer to your question, than to not reply at all. Silence doesn't necessarily indicate that we're not able to provide the information. It often suggests we're working on it. If we don't have the information, it's better to reply and say that. And if we're going to take some follow-up action, let the the sender know what work we're going to do and when they can expect to hear back from us. It just manages that communication and makes it clear to the person who sent us the request when they can expect to hear back from us with additional information. And that's part of respecting their time. The next direction that we want to think about is managing across. So this refers to when we have colleagues that we're working with, so people that we might say are at the same level as us in an organization or a project. So people that we are working with, not working for. And what are the kinds of things that we need to think about when managing those relationships? So first of all, when we're talking about communicating with them or giving them direction, we need to make sure that we've included all of the information that they might need, so that they understand what it is that we are asking them to do or what work it is that we're doing alongside of theirs and how those things fit together. If we do need to communicate and ask a question, it's important that we don't assume that all of the information is understood. And this gets back to communication and making sure that our messages are clear and complete. People should have the opportunity to have all of the information that they need. When we're asking people in the across direction to do things for us, we need to respect their role. They're at the same level of authority or level of responsibility within the organization or the project. And if we're asking them to do some work for us or trying to manage their activities, it's important that we do that in a respectful way and ask them to do things or ask them to provide you with some information. Don't tell them to do it because we don't have the authority to do that. And we should make sure that if we're asking people to do things or to provide some information, that we're asking the right person or group to do that. What I often do if I'm not sure if this person is the right person that I should be asking, I don't know whether they'll have the information that I'm looking for, I want to make sure that I let them know that, and I will include as part of my message, I'm not sure if you're the right person, and if I have this wrong, perhaps you could redirect me to somebody else. A key part of managing in the across direction and also in the down direction is the tool of delegating and the work that we might do to delegate tasks or activities to somebody else. So this applies primarily in the across and down direction. It is really difficult to delegate up to get someone above you to take on a task that's your responsibility. It can be done, but we would have to manage it very carefully. Delegation means that we're entrusting someone else to do work that is our responsibility. A key part of delegating that's often forgotten is that if we're delegating work to somebody, we're still accountable for the outcome of that work. It's still our responsibility to see that that work is done, but we're asking somebody else to contribute their effort or their knowledge or resources to that particular piece of work because we don't have that expertise or we don't have the time to do that work ourselves and we need some additional resources to contribute to it. So why would we want to delegate work to other people? What would be some of the reasons that we would have that we want to delegate work to others? And I'll ask you to use the chat box to contribute to why we might want to delegate work to someone else. Yep, time management is a big part of it. We don't have the time to do our work, and so we need to bring in some additional resources, reducing our workload. There's also the opportunity to increase the skills of the person that we're delegating the work to, finding that opportunity to create a place for somebody to learn something new or to contribute in a different way than they've had the opportunity to before. And if we have, yeah, that's right, if we have some specific skills that we need to devote to the project, we can delegate some of the other work that maybe doesn't require our specialized skills and knowledge. So workload management and resource management, those are some of the key drivers for delegation. A big part of it should also be that we want to create those development opportunities. Effective delegation, a big part of that is effective development and being able to provide those opportunities for people to learn something new. We can also think about delegating as part of building our relationships, creating those opportunities and engaging with others that maybe we haven't engaged with a lot in the past, creates that opportunity to build those relationships, learn about other people, and let other people learn about us. If we're in a supervisory relationship with someone, delegating work to them is a way of fostering trust with them. We're trusting this person to do this piece of work that's our responsibility. And if it's done well, we can create not just a development opportunity, but a trust relationship with that other person. We're trusting them to do that, and they're trusting us to set them up in a way that they're going to be successful. Some of the misconceptions about delegation. A lot of times people don't want to do it because they feel that they might be seen as shirking their responsibility, that they're just passing off work to other people and they're not willing to do the work themselves. There can also be concerns about giving up power and control. If we're giving away a responsibility or a task to somebody else, we also have to give them some information in order for them to be successful at doing it. And it can mean that we don't have full control over the work, mostly because we're not doing it ourselves. So the how of the work is now being handled by somebody else, and it means we're no longer in control. As I said, it can also make us seem non-essential if we're allowing somebody else to do work that perhaps we were seen previously as the only one who could do that, or perhaps considering that we're diminishing our own importance. Um, there's also the case where it's sometimes seen as it's just easier to do it ourselves. It would take just as much effort on our part to explain it to another person than if we just did it ourselves. And that can be true if we're waiting until the very last minute to delegate work to another person. And so, yes, we don't have the time to do it properly. But if we're planning properly and we're looking for those opportunities to delegate work rather than just seeing it as a release valve for our own time management, we can find ways to make sure that we're doing it effectively, and the time invested in teaching that other person to do this particular task, or at least telling them all about what's required for it, can actually be seen as an investment in their development and in building that relationship. There can also be a sense of not wanting to count on others, or not feeling like you can rely on other people to do your work. And again, this is related to those effective, trusting relationships. We need to be able to build those and build on them in order to work effectively with others. So what to delegate and not to delegate. So we should delegate when there's an opportunity for learning or training. We can only delegate work that we can clearly describe. So if you can't describe to yourself what it is that needs to be done in a particular task, it's going to be very difficult for the delegate to be uh, successful in the work that you give them. And we can delegate work that is required for our project or our responsibilities to be completed on time. And again, that recognizes that we need those additional resources and that additional effort that we just do not have the time to do in advance of whenever the work is whatever the deadline is for the work. Things that we should not delegate. Don't delegate to somebody else conflict resolution. If people are not getting along, don't ask somebody else to sort that out. They're not going to be familiar with the circumstances. And if you're a supervisor, this is your responsibility to sort out conflict resolution between people that report to you. If you have to deliver bad news to somebody, so if you have to talk to your supervisor or your PI and let them know that the grant application that you wrote was not successful in getting funded, don't make somebody else deliver that news to the investigator. If that's your responsibility, you should do that yourself. Critical decision making. So when you have to decide which vendor to use for a particular activity or a person to be hired for your team, that's a critical decision that if it's your responsibility, you should definitely do that. And we should also not delegate the stuff that we would think of as being the quote unquote crap, the routine, dull things that we have to do every day. That's not a learning opportunity for somebody to take that on. If it's really absolutely necessary because of time, it's something that you could consider delegating, but you shouldn't make a habit of passing off that work to other people because you're not interested in doing it. I have a lot of responsibilities in my work, things like reviewing and approving timesheets and reviewing and approving leave applications, and there's a lot of that going on these days with people changing their vacations because of the COVID situation. It's mindless bureaucratic work that we have to do, paperwork that needs to be accomplished. I can't delegate that to somebody else. It's my responsibility, and there's nothing for anybody else to learn from doing that. I just need to do it. Remember when we're delegating that we're delegating the what of the work and not so much the how. If there are particular hows about how the work needs to be accomplished, of course, we want to make sure that we tell the delegate that. But we also need to give them the opportunity to learn how to do this particular piece of work. And so if the how is not that important, it's let the delegate have the opportunity to learn from that. If they ask you questions about how to do something, maybe turn that into a learning opportunity or a coaching opportunity and get them to propose how they might accomplish that. And you can give them some guidance as to whether that might work or not. So in summary, Delegation 101, remember that you're delegating the work, not the responsibility. You're asking them to take on a particular task, and if the how is not important, we need to let them figure that out in order to accomplish the work and learn from it. It requires that you have the opportunity to spend time training, giving clear direction. You're the delegator. You want to make sure that your delegate gets the right information from you and has the opportunity to learn and get input on the work that they're doing. And when we're delegating, it's important that we don't micromanage. I'm pretty sure if I took a little poll here with everybody, everybody has experienced being micromanaged. And it's a difficult situation to be in and something that we can try and rectify when it's happening if we can recognize it and apply some good tools to that. So micromanagement is defined as approaches with excessive control or extreme attention to detail. So in other words, somebody who's hovering over you, somebody who's asking you regularly for updates. It can also include someone who fails to give you all of the information that you need to do the work and only doles that out to you when you ask about it. And so your work is constantly changing and you're not quite sure what the direction is that you're going in because you only have the information that they've given you today or to this point. Micromanagement fails to accomplish its objective. It wants to manage and make sure that the output of the work is exactly the way the micromanager wants it to be, but it never accomplishes that because it just frustrates the person who's doing the work, and it makes it impossible to accomplish the objectives and requires so much more effort than if the person just delegated the work effectively. So it doesn't work. The delegate doesn't learn anything. The delegator doesn't gain anything in time and efficiency because they're spending so much time micromanaging the person. And it doesn't do anything to develop trust between the people involved. And it eventually means, despite its intention, that we actually have a lack of focus on goals. Even though we're focusing so specifically on details, we're losing track of what the overall goals are for the work. So what causes this? Usually it's caused by the personality of the individual, but it's usually developed because the person has experienced in the past a failure of trust with somebody that they've delegated work to. Things like being insecure about our own role, being afraid of being superfluous, some of those things I talked about with why we might not want to delegate. Previous experience is usually the biggest driver of micromanagement. People have had put their trust in someone and have found that that's not been worthwhile because the person let them down. And so as a result, they're afraid to let go of the work and have somebody else do it. And they're afraid of what that might look like or for them or what that's going to make them look like to other people. As I said, the net effect is that it's inefficient and we don't build that trust. And it doesn't exactly create opportunities for delegates because they're being told piece by piece exactly what to do, and they're not really learning anything as a result of that activity. So what are some of the things we can do to combat this? If you're the delegate, so somebody is giving work to you and they're micromanaging you, a big first step in this is trying to understand why they're doing it. What is it that is causing them to do this? Is this the way that they've always worked and nobody's corrected them? Have they had an experience in the past where their trust was broken? Are they afraid of that? That possibility of being seen as superfluous or not necessary because now somebody else could do a piece of their job. Try to understand why they're doing what they're doing and then work to build trust with this person. Try and establish what the criteria are with them that will allow them to see you as being successful in the work that you're doing. Communication is a big key for this, keeping them in the loop and trying to stay in the loop yourself about what it is that they're wanting you to do. Doing what you say that you will do. So if you promise to complete a certain piece of work by the end of the day or the end of the week, make sure that you actually do that. And if you are able to, finish it early and let them know, I've accomplished this piece already. Is there something else that I can do as a part of this work? And trying to get them to open up about what it is that they're trying to get you to accomplish. Another key piece of this, though, is to also consider whether it actually is micromanagement. Or is it just the work that is being done actually requires that extreme attention to detail, and it's so very important that every single step be done exactly the right way, or more to the point, exactly the same way that that person would do it. Maybe it's not micromanagement then, maybe it is just exacting in specific direction that we're being given. So a question from somebody, how do you get to why when you are the delegate? That's really just about communicating with the person who's giving you the work, having those conversations, asking questions of them about why it is that you're doing this particular piece of work. And part of that will allow the delegator to explain to you why they're taking this particular approach. And this is also a part of, if we're managing in the up direction, getting to know the person that we're working with or working for, so that we can understand how they like to have work reported back to them, how they like to see work done and documented, and what are the tools that they like to use to be able to accomplish that. And that would come back to how you're going to communicate to them. Getting to why is really about getting to know the person that you're working for or working with, asking questions of them, and doing all of that in a respectful way, understanding how they want to work, but also recognizing that they are in a position of authority, and they're also in a position of expertise, and they have things to teach you, and you want to make sure that you're actually getting that opportunity to learn from them. When you are the manager, when you are the one who is delegating to somebody else, you want to make sure that you are following those same steps. Check yourself to if you are finding the person that you're working with is, maybe they're being resistant to taking direction from you. Maybe the reason that they're being resistant is because you are micromanaging them, and you are getting in the way of them learning and trying to do the work on their own, and trying to get to that end point that you've already defined for them. Think about maybe stepping back a little bit and letting the person do the work that you've already asked them to do. Make sure that you're communicating well with the person that you have delegated to. This doesn't mean communicating to them every day. It means communicating to them in a clear, concise, and complete manner at a time frame that makes sense for the work that you've asked them to do. And when you have promised to give someone information or support around a task that you've given them, make sure that you follow through and you actually do that. You need to be supportive and engaged with the person that you've delegated work to, so that they can be successful. Remember, the work that you've given them is your responsibility. So their failure to complete it is actually your failure to complete it. Any other questions about micromanagement or delegation? All right, so looking at the last direction, if we're managing in all directions, we also have the down direction, and this is people that we would be supervising. This is also often people that work in support roles within our organization. People that work in the supporting administrative functions within our department or organization, and making sure that we are communicating and working well with them, and again, building good relationships that we can use to accomplish the work of our projects or our departments. So first, when we're working with people in a down direction, remember to ask for the work that we need to have done. Ask our question, ask for the task to be completed. Even when we're in a supervisory role, it's very rare that we want to make it an order what we're telling somebody to do. we do want to be respectful of the work that they're going to do, and particularly if it's someone with specific expertise. Perhaps it's a human resources professional and we need their guidance on preparing a job description for a role that we're going to be posting. We need to make sure that we're asking for their input and asking them to take on tasks and not telling them how to do the job that they already have specific expertise in. Again, if something is critical, don't assume that it's understood. So if you're asking for information about how taxes might be applied in a particular purchase that your project is planning to make sure that you provide the context when you're asking for that input and that information so that the person understands the specific situation you're talking about and not just a generalized question about that topic. Again, ask the right person or group, and if you're not sure, ask for that input from the person that you're referring to first. Is there somebody else who might have this information? Again, only tell the how of the work that you're giving to somebody if it's critical. If the specific steps that need to be taken are required to be done in a particular way, then of course you want to provide that guidance. But if there's an opportunity for someone to learn how to do something on their own, kind of like with delegation, we want to make sure that they have that opportunity to learn from their own experiences how a particular thing can or should be done. And a key tool that we can use in managing this way is persuasion. Persuasion is something that we can use again in all directions, but it is particularly important in the down direction where we need people to do work for us, not because we're delegating it to them because it's their job to do it, but we need them to pay some specific attention to what it is that we're asking from them. So I'll just pause and ask the group, how would you define what we mean by persuasion in the context of managing the work of other people? Yeah, to convince our project team with facts. So make sure that we're convincing people to do things based on actual facts and knowledge, motivating a team to do the work is definitely something that we want to use persuasion for. Getting someone on board by indicating the benefits to the individual or the group. That's a really good definition. So it's important, first of all, to remember what persuasion is not. Persuasion is not coercing people into doing things they don't want to do. It's not manipulating people by only giving them part of the story so that they'll do what we're asking. It's not marketing and selling people on what it is that we have to offer. And it is definitely not giving people ultimatums. It is not saying do this or else. That's persuasive, but it's not a good persuasion approach. What it really means is that we're leading our colleagues and everyone within our team in the up, across, and down directions. All of those are our colleagues that are working for the same purpose. We're trying to work towards a shared solution to a problem that's applicable to us, but because it's going to affect the work that we're doing, particularly if we're working on a project and we're all working towards the same objectives, a solution for you is a solution for the project. And so persuading people to help us, provide us with information, take on tasks where we're not in a position to order somebody to do something, we want to persuade them to take on some task or to give us some information because it's going to lead to that shared solution. So some of the ways that we can think consciously about using persuasion is to think about the principles of persuasion and the process that we can follow. So the principles for persuasion, there's 5 known principles, and I'll have a reference for you about this in the slides that I'll share after the session today. The 5 principles of persuasion, first of all, we have the principle of liking. And this is that people are more likely to want to help or provide information if they like the person. So we want to make sure that we're friendly, affable, likable. We don't have to be best friends with everybody that we're interacting with, but we do have to be friendly and approachable so that people are going to like us and want to work with us. There's also the principle of reciprocity, and this is where if we're asking somebody to do some work for us or to give us some information that we need to accomplish our work within our project, there's going to be a reciprocity. And the phrase quid pro quo has got a lot of different political meanings these days, but it really means if I do something for you, you're going to do something for me at a later date. So we have to remember when we've asked somebody to do something for us that we have to make sure that they understand we will do something for them at a later date when they need it. We also have to remember the principle of consistency and transparency. Often when we're needing to ask people to do things, we might have to talk to multiple different people and get them engaged in our project, get them signed on to the work that we need to do so that they're going to support it. When we do that, we need to be consistent in our message, why we're asking for this person to provide that information or why we're asking for this group to become involved in our project. If I ask one person and I say, I need you to be involved in this because of X, I have to make sure that I'm giving consistent information to other people. That if I'm saying, I need you to help me with this because I'm running out of time, I don't give a different reason to another person. And we also have to be transparent. If the reason that we need somebody's involvement is because we run out of time or we don't know about this particular thing, we need to be honest and transparent about that. The principle of credibility relates to our own specific skills and knowledge and the work that we can contribute to the overall project, and also how credible our request is. If we're asking somebody to participate in our project or our work, we need to make sure that we're credible in the sense of having the authority to do that, and the reasons that we're providing make sense because of our position within the organization or the project. And lastly, we have the dual principle of social proof or scarcity. And this principle requires that you know the people that you're interacting with, that you understand what matters to them, what motivates them to do their work or to participate in any activities. And so understanding a little bit about what they want in their work and their jobs is helpful. And again, this involves getting to know a little bit about the people that you're working with. The principle of social proof refers to those people who need to know, first of all, that other people have agreed to participate in this. So if you're trying to get people, for example, to be on an advisory committee and you're starting from scratch, you don't have anybody on the committee yet, you're going to approach people to ask them if they want to be a part of this. Some people are motivated by the principle of social proof. They want to see that other people have already signed up for this, and that will reinforce to them the validity or the importance of the thing that you're asking them to do, and so they will sign on. Another way to think about this is these people are bandwagon jumpers. They see that other people are doing something and they want to be a part of it. Another thing that, or the reverse of this principle, is the principle of scarcity. Some people want to know that they're getting in at the early stages of something, that they're getting in on being a part of something that nobody else has signed up for yet. These are people that want to be trailblazers. They want to be the first ones to sign up or know about a particular thing. And that principle of scarcity, being in the know, is something that motivates them and drives them. And knowing what motivates people can help you to persuade them to be a part of what you're asking them to do. The process we want to follow with persuasion, first of all, we want to establish that credibility, that we have the means to be asking this person and enabling them to be useful in the work that we're doing. Establishing that common ground, as somebody said, the benefits of the project and motivating people to do the work, that they're going to gain something from this, and it's a part of what we all want to be doing. Making sure that it's clear what you want them to do. What exactly is the objective of the work that you want to do with them, and what are they going to have to do as a part of that? And lastly, if you can, make that emotional connection. Understanding what motivates people and what the benefits might be beyond themselves or even beyond the work can help with reinforcing and persuading them to be a part of what you're doing. So when we think about managing in all directions, up, across, and down, these three tools, communication, delegation, and persuasion, can help us with building and sustaining those relationships, both for our work on a particular project or task, but also for our work overall. And the the careers that we're going to have in the fields that we're working in. All of this is related to building relationships. Relationships between people, these are some common definitions of relationships. It really means the way in which people are connected and the way in which they're going to work together, how they feel about one another, the connections and history that they have, and the way in which they're going to work. But instead of just relationships in our work, we want to have effective relationships. So from the group, what would you think would be some of the key characteristics of an effective relationship in our work? So two votes for trust. Anything else that makes the relationship effective? So honesty and clarity, again, related to trust. Mutual respect. That's a big one. So yeah, trust would be at the top of the list for me in terms of an effective relationship. We also have to have things like mindfulness and accountability. So we need to be mindful of the work that we're doing and how that's going to affect other people. And when we make commitments to people, that we are accountable for that we follow through and do the things that we say we're going to do. We also need to respect the fact that there are different opinions within our teams and our workplaces, and we need to respect that diversity and look at things from a variety of different perspectives. Of course, we need to have effective communication, so not just communication 101, but really good communication and understanding between us. And as somebody said, mutual respect. So really understanding what it is the person believes in, the ways that they like to work, and respecting and trying to work within those things that are meaningful to them. So respect is something I've mentioned a few times, and really this is something across all of the relationships in our workplace, up, across, down, outside of our organization. Respect is really at the heart of all of those things. Mutual respect, we want to, if we exert or give respect to somebody else, we would expect that they would give respect back to us too. So when it comes to respect, RESPECT, find out what it means to you. And also find out what it means to other people. Understand what it is that people want, what respect means to them, and how you can be respectful to them. Sometimes this is even things that might even seem old-fashioned to us, where people like to be referred to by their honorific. They like to be called Dr. Roscoe instead of Robyn. And if that's the way they prefer to be treated, if they feel that that shows the appropriate respect to them, we should oblige them with that. It shows that we respect them and that we're willing to treat them in a way that they like, with the expectation that they're going to treat us in the way that that we like as well. So we should do this all the time. It isn't something we should do just when we're thinking about needing to persuade somebody or wanting to delegate work to somebody else. We need to be doing this at all times. The key thing about building relationships and building connections with people is that we never know exactly when we're going to need to work with somebody or need somebody to do some work for us. And the time to build respect and build that that effective relationship shouldn't be when we need it to be effective. We should be working towards that all the time and wanting to make all of our relationships as effective as possible, so that when we need them, when we need to rely on them for something, we'll know that they're there and it's something that we can expect is going to be able to provide us with support. Some examples of respectful interactions. This is something I encourage my own team members to do often. When we're asked for something, if somebody asks us for example, Robyn, can you tell me all of the grants that we received in the year 2018? That's definitely something I could do. I could run a report or pull up a file and gather all of that information. But probably it would be worthwhile for me to try and understand why they're asking for that particular information. Are they wanting to include it in a report? Have they been asked by somebody else to provide that information? That particular year, what is it about that time period that's so important, so that when I provide them back the information, I don't provide them just for what they asked for, I provide them with what they need to solve their problem, so that we don't have too much back and forth. And what I provide them, if it's going to specifically answer their question, it's not going to lead to other confusion, because what I gave them didn't exactly match with what they needed. It was just what they asked for. So making sure that we understand what people need, not just what they've asked for, is an important part of making that interaction respectful. We're not wasting people's time, including our own. It is important to ensure that confidential information is treated confidentially, but we do have people within our organization who need to know pieces of information that we have. And so we need to make sure that we're clear if we're providing information that's confidential. We understand why the person needs it, what they're going to use it for, that they have the authority to have that piece of information, and that we find that balance between keeping all of our information secret and allowing people to do their jobs. For me, an example of this is, again, all of my administration staff. They all have access to information in our grant financial reports, or even within our human resources system, because they have to do their jobs, like entering timekeeping and managing leave applications and understanding how much vacation time somebody has. That means that they have access to information like how much that person gets paid. And they don't need to have that information, but they have access to it because they need access to everything else. And so understanding that balance of what they need to do their job, and ensuring that they understand the rules around confidentiality. Maintaining awareness of our stakeholders, what it is that they need and the environments in which they're working, and making sure that we deliver on all of those. And of course, when we make commitments and promises to people, that we deliver on those, that we meet and keep all of our commitments, and if possible, over deliver on some things, in order to help other people do their work and be able to advance in the things that they're working on. So in summary, our keys for managing in all directions: relationship building, and not just relationships, but effective relationships, are essential to keeping all of those directions managed well. Remember to think about the why somebody's asking us for something, not just the what. Those three tools, communication, delegation, and persuasion, are essential for all of those relationships, not just to maintain the relationship, but to get the work done that we need to with all of those people. Keep in mind respect and respectful interactions at all times. I didn't mention this in the three directions because it's a bit redundant, but in all of those things, whenever we're interacting with people, if we've asked a question, if we've asked for an opportunity, if we've asked somebody to do something for us, make sure that you say thankful, and don't just say it, actually be grateful for the work that they're doing or the opportunity that's been provided to you. And always remember the goal of all of our work. We want to complete our work, and if we're working in projects, our goals and objectives on time, so meeting our commitments, and within budget, so within the funds that are available. If we go over budget on the work that we're doing, we may not have the responsibility to fix that, but we've created a problem for somebody else. So we need to be aware of that. And with that, I'll end and ask you if you have any questions. I do have a question that someone has submitted. Any tips for a delegate to differentiate between extreme micromanagement and abusive behavior? There seems to be a fine line in some workplaces. I've tried to set reasonable boundaries with a micromanaging supervisor and have been met with stonewalling. Some tips I would suggest, thinking about some of the things that I suggested already. If you can, try and understand why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. If it is verging on abusive, or what's known in human resources parlance, toxic or disrespectful behavior, there are some human resources approaches that you can take to address that if it's serious and it is, as you describe it, abusive. That's not okay in the workplace. workplace, and there are mechanisms that you can use through human resources to try and address that. Again, having those open conversations and trying to understand why and what is the overall objective of the work that you're doing. If those communication lines are not open to you, it will be very difficult to change the behavior of the other person, or even just change your circumstances in your work with that person. But I would encourage you to try some of the things we talked about here. Getting to know them, getting to know why, trying to exceed in wherever you can some of the requests that they've given you, so that you show that you are trustworthy in the work that they're asking you to do, in order to build up that trust with them. I hope that I've answered your question. If you want to ask something different, please go ahead. And I'll stop there and see if anybody else has any questions.
Thanks very much, Robyn. If people do have questions, as Robyn said, you can enter them in the Q&A box. Feel free to share comments as well in the chat. And thank you to the person who asked that question. It is really important. And, you know, hopefully you're in a workplace. I know workplaces can really differ, even if you're in academia at a university or a post-secondary institution. So hopefully you have access to a human resources representative or department, and perhaps an employee and family assistance program. That might be
That's
something. Yeah, Robyn, if you want to, you know, mention anything about that, it might be a venue. If you're not sure, this seems maybe verging on abusive behavior, then that's definitely, I think, a venue that you could take to get help without kind of feeling like you're launching right into something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about the employee assistance programs, but yeah, those are available in a lot of workplaces, and it's a benefit that a lot of employees and even trainees have access to that we often forget about. But there are a lot of resources available there, including counseling, if that's something that you think would be helpful for you. It's something I've taken advantage of myself through employee assistance, and I don't know why I always forget to mention it, but it's definitely something that's there. If you're a trainee or associated with an academic institution, again, through the graduate student programs or the postdoc associations, there are often resources available. If you go to seek them out, you'll be able to find them, and hopefully those will be able to provide you with some assistance too.
And we did have a webinar last week that talked a bit about mental health and work-life balance in graduate school and in academia. And, you know, so it is something, sometimes just being able to talk out a situation with someone in a confidential manner can be helpful, or with a
Yeah.
peer as well. But yeah, thank you very much, Robyn. This is really helpful information. I know, just jumping on the micromanagement
Yep.
theme, I had a question. In my past, in a past workplace, I had a supervisor who was, he just didn't have that trust. It took a long time to build trust with him. So he had a real tendency to micromanage. And in our work, it sort of lent itself to micromanagement as well. As you said, sometimes the work just is really detailed, and the
Yep.
requirements are really, you know, they need a lot of eyes on them. And so, you know, I did work really hard to build trust with the supervisor, and over delivering helped. It was kind of a pain
Yes.
at the time, but, you know, putting in that work could help. But I just wondered, I found with my next role, when I moved on, it was almost hard to adapt to having a manager that didn't micromanage.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone has had that situation, but I just wanted to sort of pose that as a question. If you have any tips or strategies on how to adjust from dealing with micromanagement.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a bit of post-traumatic stress sometimes when that situation happens. Um, yeah, there isn't really a solution. I think a big part of all of this is self-awareness and understanding of yourself and what it is that you want and the ways in which you like to work. I've had experiences of working for a micromanager, and my I guess response strategy in that particular situation, one was to again try and understand what was motivating that person to behave or give direction in that way. And when I got to understand what their motives were for some of the almost ridiculous detail that they were going to in not just telling me how to do things, but requiring me to do things in a certain way. A lot of the way I was able to work within that was to ask a lot of questions. So, why do we do it that way? Why is that particular data point required all the time? And that helped to get them to relax a little bit about the requirements, because in some instances they couldn't say why it was necessary. And I had a maybe perhaps an advantage in that situation, because I'd been working for 10 or 12 years by that point, so I had a little bit of my own experience and confidence to bring to that situation. But just asking those questions was a really good way of getting to why, about the person, but also about the specific pieces of work. And it did help us work towards a happy medium on those things. Okay, some other questions here. If you delegate tasks and the work is performed poorly, where do you go to from there? Do you give them another chance, or do you pull back responsibilities? Good question. Some of that will have to do with what your role is. If you're their supervisor or they're your colleague, if you're their supervisor, of course, you're going to give them that constructive feedback about the work that they've done. And of course, you will need to be specific. It's odd to talk about not micromanaging, but being specific. But you will need to be specific about what they did that was incorrect or poor, and what they might do in the future to be able to do it better. If you're working with a colleague, again, you're going to want to give them feedback, but you need to do it in a different way if you're not their supervisor. But you still need to make sure that people understand if the work that they've done on your behalf is not up to the standard. And you need to ask yourself, is it not up to the standard because it's not the way I would do it, or is it just poor? If it's just poor, you need to give anybody the feedback about what they could do to do it differently. Whether you would give them another chance is really up to you in terms of the nature of your relationship with that person. I would hope that if you've delegated tasks to someone, that you are checking in with them regularly about their progress, not sitting on top of them, but giving them that opportunity to ask you questions and checking on their progress, so that if there is a deviation from what's needed, you're able to correct it before the work is quote unquote finished. Hopefully that helps with your question. Another question, what happened when the PhD supervisor is really on top of the hierarchy and has so much power that the power abuse and the way he treats students can't be judged? How do you deal with them? Well, that's related to what we were talking about earlier, I guess, in the sort of potentially abusive relationships. Again, if you're in a situation where you're feeling that, you do need to seek out some additional resources to help you understand what you can do in that circumstance. So your human resources would be one approach, and your employee support programs, or if you're a trainee support programs. There are a lot of resources out there, and like I said, we just don't always know that they're there until we need to go find them. But you will be able to find them. If this is someone, as you say, that's in such a position of power that they're really not, you're not able to provide feedback to them, there still should be ways that you can provide some feedback, either anonymously through human resources, or through a colleague of that person, to ask how you might be able to provide that kind of feedback. Staying in any kind of situation where it is destructive or abusive is not good for anybody. So I guess at an extreme end of things, you could consider moving to another situation, but trying to find a way to work through the specific situation that you're in, either to get some additional support or to provide that feedback, would be one of the things I think would be important to do.
Yeah, thanks, Robyn, and thanks everyone who's asked a question and participated in the chat. I think particularly with those questions that have come up around, potential abuses of power, really important to reach out for help, and
Yeah.
thanks for raising that. It's something I think that people are more aware of now, but it can be really hard when you're in that situation. I know with our last webinar, one of the presenters talked about, I think, having a co-supervisor. Like bringing in a co-supervisor can sometimes help kind of balance out that dynamic and provide you with someone who can, you know, uh, perhaps, yeah,
Yeah.
improve the relationship. But definitely, like Robyn said, seek out resources at your university or post-secondary institution. It's really important. Um, yeah, and actually, Dr. Karen Suchi was one of the presenters from our last webinar, and she's here and just noted to definitely bring in a co-supervisor, go to your committee for support, and seek out those resources. So I wanted to just wrap things up now, unless there are any other questions. We are getting to our time. I wanted to once again say thank you to our presenter, Robyn Roscoe. She's just been a fabulous, I think, resource for us, and we really hope you enjoyed today's webinar and found it useful. We are going to take a bit of a break over the summer, but we'll continue to post webinars by our partners on our website at meopar.ca and on Twitter. And please watch for news on Meopar's annual training and scientific meetings. They're going to be held this fall online in the last 2 weeks of October. They will be open for participation. You don't need to be a member of Meopar or a Meopar trainee to attend. And we're hoping to have some of our recent speakers host sessions, including Robyn, Karen, and Jonathan, if you attended those recent talks. So once again, thanks everyone. Stay well and have a great day.